Hi, I'm Devin.
And I'm Adrian. And today we are here to talk about leading your organization in the age of AI. So, last time we were here, we were talking about leading your team in the age of AI. Before that, we talked about managing your career in the age of AI. So, this is part three of this three-part series. By the end of this series, you should know how to effectively navigate this new AI environment. So, with that, Devin, I'm curious. What headlines around AI adoption have caught your eye lately? Let's use that as our icebreaker.
Oh, wow. I think you sent me actually a New York Times story that was really, I can't remember the headline, but it was absolutely focused on um, the organizational level, what is happening there and how integration really is the challenge. The all anybody talks about is AI, but the disconnect between what that means and for an organization and then what it looks like to actually get on that path. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think in that same vein, this isn't the one that I was going to share, but I was listening to the HBR IdeaCast yesterday, and one of the stats was something like 70% of transformation efforts fail, and technology implementation is a transformation effort. Framing the problem that we're here to talk about today, a common response from leadership is like, we need to just implement it. Like, we need to get it out there. I'm working with one company that in the middle of Q4 last year sent his entire leadership team to an AI certificate program at Tulane, insisted that they figure it out and drive it down in the organization. You know,
how's that going for them?
right. Well, they still don't have the magic AI bullet, right? Um, Sorted out. So I'm curious, what are you seeing happening with organizations and where are they getting it wrong?
I think you just pointed out something really important, which is I think they hear AI, they're like, "Oh, AI, we should be doing something," and their solution is, "Let's get Adrian to come talk about AI for an hour at one of our meetings." And that's not or, there's this free class or there's this program, this 5-session program here, but I think it still leaves the gap of, you know, maybe people know about more tools and they know a few more things that it can do, but I think it still comes down to a lot of just talk about, "We need AI, we need an AI strategy," but the reality is very few people are using it, and the people who are using it are mainly using it to help their emails be better.
Yeah.
So it's a very limited, there's a big gap, and part of that gap is that I don't think most people really know what they're talking about when are saying, "We need AI." I don't really know if they have a good feel for that,
Yeah.
of what they really mean by that. I don't think they know what they mean by that. I think they just know that they feel like that they should be saying AI.
That's right. I think that's right. Even companies that are implementing it quickly and have rolled it out are now rolling back a lot of those efforts because they rushed headlong into it and then didn't really think about what the implications, what the process, what all of it would look like. One example that I was recently reading about was Klarna. They were in that early, 2004 rush to cut headcount and roll out AI implementation across the board. And, you know, in doing so, they learned that AI compounds issues, compounds problems. So you're moving faster, but if you're replicating bad process or you are um, don't have the staff, if you cut heads and you don't have the people to handle all those edge cases, it's going to create real problems and friction in the business. And ultimately, what they ended up having to do is hire back almost all those people. In fact, there's a stat that 54% of AI driven headcount loss has been rolled back since this has started. So I think, like, people need to slow their roll, either on the implementation side, really pause and think about what's our strategy, like you said, or, you know, what are we trying to fix with this, or what are we trying to
Yes.
grow with this?
Yeah, I think you and I actually talked about that a little bit this morning. It's like we say AI, but no one stepping back and really thinking about, um, what problem are we trying to solve, just like you said, or how does this fit into how does this fit into opportunities or our strategy or our business plan or where we're heading in the future? And, most things exist for one or two reasons, right? It's either to solve a problem or to move us forward really, really effectively and fast. Um, and I think that piece is skipped. It's like and it is often, right? Like, when we think of so if we think about just technology change, right? Like, we're gonna put in a new CRM or ERP, and we see that. We've talked about that actually maybe in one of our last meetings, or discussions about these big transformations, and then they're hiring consultants, they've carved out teams to work on this and be focused on it, and they get to the point and they're like, oh my gosh, like, we've just spent years and money and consulting time, and we've not done other things, and now we're either pausing or we're having to completely relook at what did we think we were doing and go back, and so, in some ways, the trap, right, is that AI is potentially just a sexier, faster version of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And so where I see a lot of teams get it wrong is they aren't doing that. I think last time we did talk about the slingshot pause of you've got to pull back to fling forward. And so what do you do in that pause? I think it is, like you said, taking stock and saying, what's the value creation opportunity for us? What do we want? How do we want to grow as a company? If we have this time savings, if we are able to eliminate some of the minutia through AI, what would that allow us to do with that time back? How are what if our processes are high friction? How do we reduce friction instead of replicate bad process and then accelerate all those issues or compound all those issues by using AI, which is what I see happening. Yeah.
Yeah, just making things worse,
Just
faster.
making things worse faster. I think that's exactly right. Teams need to slow down. They need to pause. They need to think intentionally, and they need to start to plan what this looks like. One of the things that I read recently as a good tactic for this slow down and pause phase before you start moving forward in implementation, whatever that looks like. When you think your leadership team is aligned, have everyone in the room write down, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who's going to be doing it? What's the end goal? And see how many people are actually in alignment as a leadership team in that work.
Yeah, that misalignment or that not being aligned is super common, and why does it happen, right? It happens because, other things that we work with organizations all the time, which is there's a lack of trust. People don't feel like they can be honest about their thoughts or ideas or feelings about something, and so those conversations either don't happen, but if they do even if they do happen, I think there's a lot of times that those aren't super honest conversations. And then because there's often a push to like, well, we have to do something, they could just move forward and they move forward with that at that alignment. And then what you talked about, which is where things start breaking down, and is that it shows up. It shows up that everybody's not aligned, and then it starts causing some challenges, and then you've gotta stop and pull back, and that goes to, something I was thinking about earlier and I shared with you, and that was when you're doing any kind of, new thing and you're trying to integrate that new thing and make it work for you, and it takes time. It's not like we decide and snap our fingers, and so in order to get aligned, to include people, to have it be a shared throughout the organization effort, well, what does that need? Well, you either spend time on the front end setting that up, and that feels slow. And so everybody wants to move fast, but that feels slow. It's kind of like the pullback, right? Like, mm. And then so you move fast, and then you do spend time, but you spend it on the back end with frustration, pissed off people. wasted time and money. And so you kind of have a choice, right? With any kind of change or implementation or movement forward. Do you want to You're going to spend time. Would you like to spend that time proactively on the front end or reactively on the back end? And a lot of times back end time is takes more time and is more expensive for a lot of different reasons. So I think when you think about AI, you've got to think about that. You got to think about alignment strategy. You've got to think about readiness of the team um, while you're doing it. And then frustratingly for a lot of people, you've got to invest that time up front.
Mhm. One of the things that you said triggered a thought. In that early alignment, I think it also needs to make sure you have more people than the leadership team at the table, especially when something as transformational as AI is what's being discussed. I see a lot of leaders coming in and viewing AI primarily as a tool for cost savings. And they don't want to bring other people into the conversation because they think nobody wants to make cuts. Nobody's going to take this as serious as me. I can't wait to cut head count, is how a lot of people think about it. And instead, there's some orgs that are doing this really well where they say, one, like I said, what's that opportunity for value creation? But what are our non negotiables as a team? I'm working with one organization that said, they feel confident they could replace their project management, a lot of it with AI. Well, they said a non negotiable is we're not going to let go of anybody as a result of that. So, how do we repurpose and redirect those people towards more meaningful work? Right. And I think you shared with me a really great example from IKEA, which I loved. I know. So, IKEA has um, rolled out Billy, which was a chat bot for customer service, and it was able to handle, I think it was something like 74% of all customer service calls. So they were looking at the potential to lay off 8,500 people. And rather than lay those people off who had all this institutional knowledge and knew the, catalog frontwards and backwards and knew all the like Billy bookcase mods that people did on TikTok or whatever, they said, you know, what could we how could we reskill, repurpose these people? So they said, "Look, we've wanted to get into the design industry. What if we reskilled these people to become AI-powered design consultants?" So, all those cool tools where you can, like, drop a chair into your living room. They taught these customer service agents how to use it and unlocked 1.4 billion in new revenue last year from design services alone. So, I mean, think about the headcount savings of 8,500 people versus this huge value creation over $1 billion by rethinking how to retain that institutional knowledge and then drive the business forward.
Yeah. So when you share that with people, because I do think that, one of the big things is like, oh, think of all the things we can do once we get this in place and we won't need all these people. So when you share that example, how do people react to it or how are organizations reacting to it?
I think it's like an aha. Like people aren't thinking about it that way. I think people are really shocked that there is that kind of opportunity out there because we don't pause, right, as organizations and think about how could we repurpose people's time. I think institutional knowledge is the value that people bring in these situations a lot. So I'm curious, is there anything in the past that makes you think about this, about, you know, losing institutional knowledge? I think about this a lot. Like this is happening across the board in a lot of manufacturing, so what can organizations do to retain that and capitalize on it?
Yeah. And before I kind of go down that road, I go back to kind of this old line, which is, you can't cut your way to success.
Yeah.
And I think the initial thing around AI is the idea that, well, we'll have this quick win and we'll cut people, which is also the consultant model, right? Like big consultant comes in, we're going to, yeah, 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 we, we can save you tons of money. Well, yes, we can. We're going to cut a bunch of people. And then that ends up being a problem. And I think it's very similar. I don't think you can cut your way to success. And I think that mental shift of what could we do if we could free people up to do things that we have not had time to do? And I think we talked about that last time with teams. You and I talked about like even our AI use and how we've used it and maybe how we've become a bit more efficient and been able to turn things around, more quickly for clients, and it's allowed us to, in some ways, focus on a few things that we kept having to put on the back burner because we were so busy doing right, like, grinding on things. So,
Yeah, I'm curious how do you help teams have that conversation?
what about the you can't cut your way way to
Well, I think
success, or
around, how do you get out of that mindset and towards a value creation mindset and towards appreciating the talent on your team and thinking differently about how they could re-skill or repurpose or reuse that time?
Yeah, well, I guess that's the classic scarcity versus abundance, idea of, a and I think this gets in the way in a lot of things when we, talk further about how AI gets incorporated into organizations, because I think there's a bit of a scarcity mindset there too. But,
What do you mean by that?
well, I guess what I'm thinking about is when we talk about how does AI get actually embedded and used in organizations, there's the lack of sharing that I'm using AI, right? Like, is it okay? Is there some policy against it that maybe I shouldn't say anything? If I let people know I'm using AI, will they think that I'm not doing my job or I'm cheating, right? And then that gets hidden. And that's a little bit of the old school mentality of like, well, I'm not going to tell anybody what I do and how I do my job because then they won't need me anymore. So it's some version of that. Um, so I think, how do you have those conversations with teams and organizations? I mean, it is definitely a reframe and a reset. And what I expect is as we start working with more organizations around getting them to step back or including the AI conversation as part of their strategy, I think that's the opportunity have to reframe and have people thinking forward and not just about what can we cut,
Yeah.
right? Like this is a huge
Yeah.
opportunity to cut, right? And to be leaner. And we know right now, and now, I'll pivot to the succession or the cut conversation. And, I would say that that's probably true. It's true for financials. You just can't cut. It's true of people, I think, also. So, thinking about succession or institutional knowledge or what might be lost, often it's invisible until something goes wrong because that deep knowledge is what saves you when things don't go as planned
Mhm.
and when you have to rely on, experience and expertise. So, if anybody's watching The Pit, and you remember the episode where um, they get hacked, and they have none of their electronic stuff is working, that's not working, and they basically look at all these people, and there are people there that are like, "We're just going old school," right? And that institutional knowledge is what allows them to get through that 24 hours. But all the people that have only experienced, the high tech version are like, "Huh? What?" Like, and they're just basically going back, and they end up calling somebody like a retired charge nurse, and they get her in there, and she just gets in there and just starts kicking ass, right? Taking names and like, "Do this, do that." Um, so it's a little bit of an example of that, but when you don't just lose when you lose experienced people, you don't just lose, their task, you lose their judgment and their relationships, knowing just who to call or just what button to press, their memory of things and the way they worked or the way they didn't work. So that's what AI can't give you is context, and it also can't give you those relationships and that it's what we call right, it's tacit knowledge. It's what's in your gut and your head because you've seen it and you've done it and you've also worked through the blow ups and the problems and those things, and so that's essentially what you lose, so that is worth you can't just go to the new. There's what happens between the new and what you're moving from, and people are the connective tissue of
Mhm.
that. I don't know that you can move forward without completely and completely erase the past.
Yeah, I agree. I wanna I have, like, I have a couple thoughts on
Sure,
the
any
different
thoughts?
things. Yeah, one of the things you said was around going back to scarcity mindset, and I think that in that, when people say, "Okay, where do I start?" We say, "Okay, let's start with leadership planning and readiness." And I think a lot of people view this as a technology problem, right? This AI implementation is what's the right tool to solve this problem? When really, I think it is a people problem. It's a leadership problem. This failed adoption that, or this rapid rollout and then pull back, or this stuck in the mud and not getting anywhere. At the end of the day, it's a failure to address those things you're talking about, right? A failure to talk about the loss. What's this going to mean for me and my job that's going to change? I see some of the most pushback on AI implementation from IT teams, and it's because I think they're really afraid of irrelevance, because those are the jobs that were targeted first, and the people who thought they were going to have a stable, solid career as a software developer are now being, you know, um, pulled back in a way that their value is being pulled back in a way that they didn't anticipate ever. And so I think acknowledging that, is like step number one. Um, and that's what I mean by like, what are the non-negotiables then? So are we committed as a team towards openness and visibility, and in encouraging that openness and visibility? Are we, and sharing how you're using AI and what you're using it on? How are we creating the safety around that?
Well, I think it does get less scary when you talk about it,
How so?
hopefully. Well, I mean, I think when you surface things, then you can address them, and so, in a high change world, right, brittleness and anxiousness, or brittleness of systems and anxiousness of people are some of the things that are part of that, and there is a lot of anxiety, and look, the most human thing in the world is to think when something new happens or change happens, "What do I have to gain or lose by what is happening right now?" And so that is, welcome to the human condition, right? That's part of it, and we wouldn't be human if we didn't have those thoughts, and there's no one cannot tell you that they don't start there on some level. Um, and the people who are successful, though, are able to move quickly to what we call kind of owner mindset, which is the looking at what's possible, what could be, what might I learn, right? How, um, what good can come from this? And there's another thought I have about what if you get stuck in the mode of, "Oh my god, why is this happening? Why is this affecting me? This is horrible. Who made these decisions? I'm I'm just gonna not participate." And there's no yeah, there's no real there's no real dividend or plus side for that for the individual, 'cause things are moving ahead. And so if you get stuck and you can't move move forward, which I think everybody's capable of, maybe just at different times and with different, um you know, ways of that. That's there's just no value in getting stuck. It doesn't increase individual value, it doesn't increase team value, and it doesn't increase organizational value. So then it's like, well, I could spend a lot of energy being in this place, or I could spend this energy, you know.
Helping drive the change.
And I think that goes back to our first meeting, right? It was like, how do you manage a career in a time of AI? And, how do I do this? And so then we going back and look, organizations are just a bunch of individuals, right, at the end of the day. If you look at when we think about our resilience model, well, perspective, right, like mindset is the first thing, and so the collective leadership and organizational mindset drives this or keeps it from moving forward. And then I think when we talk about well, how important is strategy and what problem is this gonna solve or how is this gonna help us drive our mission or our vision? well, then you go right to purpose, right? Like, so those 2 things, right? Like having the perspective and mindset, and then, uh, in order to start looking at, well, what does this actually mean for us and where are we going? How does AI fit into this,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, yeah, so I think eh, it all lines up, right, and makes sense, right? But we still are human, and that's what is the saying? Change happens at the speed of trust. So if you lose the people or you can't get the people behind you, you won't get where you're going.
That's right. So I hear we've got to start with mindset and creating psychological safety and getting people in the right headspace for this change, right? Getting their perspective solid. I think that a lot of organizations that struggle with AI adoption are not addressing that, right? So I think that is absolutely number one. And then what I see is there's are a lot of structural, I think, artifacts of a different time. A lot of old school business models around kind of hierarchical leadership and siloed information sharing and um, some practices that are really, again, get compounded with AI. You might be getting away with it right now, even if it's pretty hard in a high change environment to operate that way. But AI is just going to shine like a glaring flashlight on all of those issues. And so, one of the things that I'm seeing organizations struggle with is that openness and information sharing and a place where the people closest to the work can drive the solutions. I think that's sounds maybe easy to say, obvious even to someone, but how few organizations do that, right? So many decisions are still top down. And so, you know, giving people, like you said, that clear true north, that clear purpose, where are we going as an organization, but then a more ground up approach to, okay, how are we going to get there? I think is the way you've got to move forward. And you're a part of this. Going back to the very first thing that were talking about in like database migrations or big system implementations like ERP implementations and CRMs. Early momentum and early buy-in and maintaining momentum and maintaining buy-in across the board is is critical. And that's old. I mean, that's not
Well, I was about to yeah, I was about to say, sort of, and ask you because a lot of your what you bring to this and what you bring to these conversations, um, because you think you very much embrace the use of AI and you're out there talking to a lot of our clients and people are really excited about this topic and you get to go in an hour trying to like impart some of this stuff, but I think some of the practicality too of what you bring to this conversation, I'd like to know more about it is the some of the big implementations you've done over time. They weren't AI, but they are others, and I think the lessons come from that. Like we said, it's just a sexy, faster, version of those kinds of changes. So, you know,
one of the things that I remember I led a big database, we called it a revitalization because we were gonna transfer to a new system, came in and looked at it, and I was part of the team that did this, and it was like, we're not even using this system to its full potential. We hadn't ever upgraded it from the original implementation almost 20 years later. So there were a ton of new features, and so rather than move to a new system, we needed to just use the system we had well. And so one of the first things that we did was say, okay, we sat down with the fundraisers and said, what are the things you love about your job? What are the things that really bring you joy and where do you have friction in that? What keeps you from getting to do that more? So many of them said, I love to be up and out with the donors. I love to be understanding what people's passion is for philanthropy, but I am out far less than I should be because I cannot get data out of the system. I don't have visibility into who I should be focusing on. I struggle to know how to prioritize my time most effectively on my donors, right? Are these the right people I should be talking to? And so what we very quickly realized is, and then the other point of friction was coordination with others, right? They were anxious to reach out because they were afraid, is somebody else talking to them? There was no visibility in the system around coordination. And so what we realized we immediately needed to do was one, rip the system wide open and say, okay, everybody's got visibility into each other's activity. And that was a tremendous culture shock, right? Because it's going to reveal who's who's got activity and who doesn't. Everybody's got an excuse. Well, I just don't put it in the system. Well, now you're going to be incentivized to put it in the system so that way we can have greater coordination. You say this is something that matters to you. You say this is preventing you from being successful. This is what it's going to take. The flip side of that is we're going to make sure that you're incentivized for it. We're going to make sure that it's part of your metrics that if you're keeping data in the system and you're being a good steward of the system, you're going to be rewarded for that. And then the other thing we did was we've got to proactively push information to help fundraisers make better decisions. So often these technology implementations are not oriented towards making the people doing the work more successful. It's so top down driven and it's like, I want this specific report for myself, or it's this one leader kind of has undue weight in the situation. So a system will be oriented towards one team, but not provide broad service across the board. And so taking the time to really understand what's going to set each team up for success. And if I could get the friction out, what's causing friction? If I got the friction out of the way, what would I do more of? What would that allow us to, again, create value, in terms of more money raised or whatever, new products developed, whatever. And all that's though, right? It's gotta be almost grassroots effort. These things cannot be top down and be effective.
Well, I think that's a great example, and I kinda love that because then you're actually giving them what they say that they want, and I think we have just that idea that if I'm not frustratingly trying to use this system or not be able to get what I want, it's holding me back from doing the things I really enjoy doing, being out with potential donors, and doing that actually is what you're trying to happen anyway, because that's where the money comes from. And I think about even for us, right, is I think we're happiest in our work when we're out there facilitating or meeting with the client. And so that the little things like my debrief notes afterwards, being able to spend 15 minutes on that and delivering something usable to the client so they can use the next morning for a follow-up, way better than me spending an hour trying to type notes and organize them in a way that they can use them. And so I do think people can get more on board with change if the the message is not, or the unsaid message is not, "Oh, we're doing this so we can be more efficient," and being more efficient means that we'll have less people. What we really want is, right, and there's this whole thing, it's like efficient is not always effective,
Yeah.
right? But how really can we be more effective? And guess what? If you if we work on this together, you get to do more of the things that you like, and you might get to do some things that you would be great at or that you would like because you're gonna have more time, and then that's gonna create value.
That's right. I think that is like when I think about the scarcity mindset versus like the abundance mindset. The scarcity mindset is often, okay, we got to be more efficient. We got to squeeze more out of our people. And so people look at that and say, why would I work harder for an organization that as soon as I free up my time, they're just going to put more on my plate? Right. So you've got to find a way to leverage this technology to make people's quality of life better, make working at your company better, make people do more of the things that they love, use their brain to their highest best use, as opposed to now you've got to process twice as many expense reports. You know what I mean? It's like get the minutia off the plate and think about it from that perspective. What's the highest best use of my people's knowledge and talent?
That drives our mission and vision, right? Because if you really say, like, "What are we here to do?" Right? And we said, "Well, what are we here to do with at Success Labs?" Using us as example, right? Well, we wanna help create better leaders, better teams, and better organizations. Well, is is me spending a lot of time typing up and organizing notes driving better leaders, better teams, and better organizations? No. Right? Like that particular task. So then it's like, okay, well, you get to spend more time actually doing that.
Mm.
And and that's, I think, the reframe, right? Like we're talking through like the reframe, and you've got to frame it up for people in a way that they can get to that owner mindset and not get stuck about loss.
This is what you 2 things you said just pinged something in my brain that I really liked. One, you brought it back to purpose. What are we really here to do? And I think as long as you can continue to drive this change back to what's our true north? What's our vision? What's our purpose? Why are we
We
here?
lose that.
And we lose that absolutely. The other thing that I heard you talk about is incentive. Why should people do this? Why should they care? One of my favorite examples of a company getting this really right is Nvidia. And they did something really, really interesting. So, in leveraging AI, uh, a lot of companies see the opportunity to get rid of their developers, right? You don't need as many developers if you've got one guy who can produce a way more code using AI. Instead of thinking about it that way, they said, okay, we're going to take our best engineers and we're going to give them access to AI to really increase their output. We want 10x output from all of our best engineers. But, and they gave them huge, token budgets to do this. So, token budget is like, how much compute do you have? So, if you've ever hit that wall that says, like, "You're out of usage," they basically said, "You guys have a giant piggy bank of tokens. Use as much as you can, but you have to come and share back with your team what's working and what's not." It created this culture of, "Show us what you're doing. Show us what you're building. Show others how you've used AI to become better. How did you create this 10x output? Replicate that across the team." And the people who continue to do that well continue to be incentivized. And so it comes back again to make it fun, create incentives to share, create incentives to empower and develop others. And in doing that, and give people their time back, right? If this engineer is creating 10x output, don't insist that they be at their desk 9 to 5, right? If they're getting the work done, let them spend their time the way they wanna spend their time, especially if they're going back and pouring into your organization by training, developing, sharing.
Yeah, or creating new things, right? That you or new ideas or the next thing because we're not over here doing these very rote, often,
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think, rote, you know, that rote things are easy to turn over, right? Like, how do you save yourself for the things that only you can do? And that's relationships and it's thinking and it's still, I still believe it's thinking and it's creativity and it's people and it's, um, ideas.
Yeah.
And so,
I agree. I agree with that. Um, okay, so we talked about, we've gotta do that leadership planning and readiness. Like, we gotta get minds right. We gotta be, aligned as a leadership team.
and while we're doing this, what are the problem we're trying to solve or the business, where we're heading as a business, like, get clarity on that.
Then we talked about, what are the structural changes that need to happen? And there likely needs to be greater organizational openness and breaking down of silos and, incentives in the right places, right?
Inclusiveness of, people participating
Yeah.
in the process of getting there.
Yeah. And then, the third one I'll name is practitioner-led adoption. So I talked about this a little bit with it needing to be a grassroots effort, the people closest to the work, deciding how that work gets done. There was a really cool example. People keep coming to me asking me about AI tools for recruitment because hiring is so challenging right now. People have perfectly tailored resumes to these job descriptions, and submitting an application now, there's no barrier to entry. It doesn't take any time. So, thousands of applications for a single job. So, recruiters are overwhelmed, right? Everybody's asking this question. I found a really cool example of a company that did this where they brought in an AI recruiter that did screening. Instead of just taking all screening off the plate of the recruiters, they had the recruiters work alongside this tool for a month. And they said, help us figure out the best way to use this technology. And what the recruiters came back and said is, we want to target this at some specific high risk candidates or highly technical types of candidates. So, jobs that are really hard to fill. And so, we need to be really on top of this specific type of candidate. People that we think are high risk in the pipeline. So, somebody who's likely got a lot of career mobility, somebody who's really attractive, somebody they think might be applying for multiple positions and so likely to fall out of the pipeline. They had a series of criteria, right? And they said, if we can target these people and have this preliminary conversation with with this screening tool, get those in our queue for Monday, let it do that over the weekend. It was able to churn through getting some basic information from these candidates. So Monday, the recruiters came in with a warm list of leads that were pre-screened by AI. They're most valuable targets, and then they were able, oftentimes by the end of the week, to have people placed into positions. It increased their speed to place. It increased their success rate. They were finding better quality candidates because they were able to tailor those early screening questions, and it allowed them to have a lot more high quality conversations with the candidates. So some of that logistical screening is what they put in AI. That way they can have more talk to us about the type of culture you're looking to move into. Talk to us about what motivates you in the work. They could really understand the culture fit, the skill fit for those individuals moving into the organization. So to me, that's such a great example of the people closest to the work should decide how these tools get implemented.
Yeah, and help make them work for you, right?
Yeah.
Like, they were able to make that work because they understood and could isolate the things that really made a difference,
Yeah.
right? It still takes that human, right, like, understanding to really target the AI to get what you want from it and have it work for you so that then you can do the human piece that really is necessary to get the right candidates in this case.
Yeah, that's right. Do you have any other good examples like that? Anything else come to mind?
Um, no, I think just reiterating that shift from just efficiency, thinking of AI from an efficiency and what can we cut standpoint to thinking of AI as a really useful tool that helps us deliver on our mission and our vision well, right? And better.
A tool for value creation,
Tool for value
a
creation. I
tool
love that.
for recognizing our vision faster, better. Yeah.
Yeah. And being able and freeing up our people to do what only they can do and what they do best. Moving things out of their way that keep them from doing those things. I mean, to me, that's the best use. And that's I think the reframe and also the how do you move forward that is beyond just like, AI. Let's we have a training day coming up, you know? Go get somebody to talk to us about AI for an hour. That'll do it, right? That's not really and I think, honestly, I think the biggest action around AI is that. It's
And I think I have 3 or 4 trainings this week and 5 or 6 last week, and it's not a bad thing, right? I think it's good to
it's a good intro, but it's
start
not the deep work.
it's not the deep work. It's not gonna transform your organization.
But yeah, what it hopefully does is open the conversation for, "Oh, where do we go from here?"
That's right. So I think that's a good segue, Devin. What are, the 3 things in the next 30 days? Let's say organizations are ready to do this. What are 3 things you think they should do?
Um, well, I think one thing you can do is you can download our AI readiness self-assessment. That would be one thing, and I think, the other couple of things might be, like, really understanding I think this is a question you ask when you do your talks, which is, like, who's using AI, and do you even know who's using AI? And, like, where is it sitting in your organization right now? Um
It's so interesting. I'll ask people to raise their hand, and I'll say, how many of you have organizations with people that are using AI? And or how many of you all have an organization AI strategy? And almost nobody raises their hand. And they'll say, well, how many of you all are experimenting with AI yourselves? Everybody raises their hand. And I think the dots haven't connected that your people are experimenting with it. They're using it. It's just not in a concerted, coordinated way. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think that's it. It's like really understanding where everybody's at, and it can tell you a lot about like where you're even at along this like readiness thing. It's like if everybody's scared, or if, and in some cases, there's been a real like let's squash this, like putting in some kind of policy that squashes the whole. Intention early on. So then people get worried, and people all the time look at me and say, well, we can't really use it at work. And they're like, "Yeah, I'm kinda, like, doing stuff at home around it." And I think just that whole pulling back, right, that slowing down to speed up, like, I think people y we're not starting in the right place, right? Like, yeah, it's great to have somebody come and talk, but that should just be a cue, like, "Okay, let's step back. when we're doing I would tell everybody, if you're doing thinking about your strategic planning, which you're probably starting to think about if you're on a traditional year, right? And a couple we're almost to the end of Q2, right? And Q3, you're starting to think about what does next year look like. But I think having really, thoughtful, strategy, uh, discussions around AI, and again, going back to something we said a couple of times is like, what do we was there a problem we're trying to solve? And also, how does this play into where we're trying to go to achieve our mission and our goals? So I would say self-assessment. I would say understand where your people sit on AI or where your organization sits on AI and be strat and now is the time to start thinking strategically about AI.
I think those are exactly
So
right.
what would you add?
Um,
Or what would you change,
yeah,
right?
one thing I might add is, like, just tactically, practically, the one gap a lot of organizations have is well-defined data and documented processes, and you cannot leverage the power of AI without having your data all in one place, knowing where your data is, and then having your processes documented. So I'm working with a team right now that's wanting to do an implementation. They're being asked to hand over all their well, okay, hand us your processes. They don't have anything. So now they want me to come in and help them write processes, and I'm like, this is, there's groundwork that needs to be done."
So people and processes, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's a huge readiness
It's on
question.
our readiness assessment is, do you know where your data is? Do you have your processes documented? This is some of that early just check boxes that you've got to check to get ready.
Yeah, if I mean, I think if I think through this conversation today, I would say, like, you are not ready if your data and processes aren't organized. You're you have no idea where your people sit, right, on that, and if you aren't thinking about strategically why you're even having the AI conversation. So, people process strategy, like, those are the things, the takeaways organizationally, I think, and I agree, like, I think the self-assessment can really surface some, organizational assessment can really surface some things and help you understand where you're at and maybe what some of the first steps might be to go down that road.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so that was part 3 of our Leading Through AI series. We started with you and managing your career. We went to managing your teams and now, leading really through as an organization. So I think the through line for us has been that AI is accelerating everything. Um, and the change is rapid, but the basic principles are the same. The principles of transformation and change are the same. You got to focus on your people, your processes, your strategy. Like
Yeah.
Devin just said, you've got to invest in your people, and you've got to spend time with them. And that's going to be the best way that you can move forward.
AI is just a sexy fast version of the old stuff.
That's exactly right. So thank you all for joining us. Please sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social, and join us next time.